Welcome. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to Seniors' Rights Service video. This video is aimed at providing information about the issue of financial abuse, particularly in relation to older women. We'll explore what challenges older women may face, how our service can help, and how other resources can assist. I'd now like to introduce our panellists, who are both from Seniors' Rights Service. Kate Kennedy is a social worker who works with clients at risk of experiencing abuse. And Melissa Chaplin is our solicitor with our legal team and also works with many clients who have this profile. Thank you both for coming in for a chat on this important issue of older women. What we're going to look at today includes financial abuse, a case study to give an example, and where to go for help. Melissa, can you tell us about financial abuse? What is it?
Okay, so elder abuse can take many forms, and financial abuse is deceiving an older person in relation to the management of their financial affairs. And there are different types of financial elder abuse. For example, an older person might pay a contribution to move in with their child in return for care, and then the relationship breaks down and they're evicted from the property. Or an older person might appoint their child their power of attorney, and then the attorney uses the older person's funds for their own benefit and breaches that relationship of trust. Another example is where an older parent might be dependent on their child for care and support, and then that child unduly influences them to enter a transaction which is unfair to the older parent and does not encourage them to seek independent legal advice. So these are the types of elder abuse matters we see through our advice line.
Thank you. Kate, do you envisage that COVID-19 is increasing the risk of financial abuse for older women?
Yes, thanks, Diana. Look, we believe that actually financial abuse is a real sleeping giant in this pandemic. The loss of jobs, the financial stress that family members might be under, mortgage stress, for example, or rental stress. We are seeing that, I think we're seeing on the news that, grandparents are getting children coming back to live at home. Parents are getting their children living at home. So this is creating perhaps a perfect storm in terms of an environment hidden away often under lockdown where family members are coercing older people to hand over their money, hand over their assets. So yeah, we're seeing that it is a potential increased risk, definitely.
And Kate, we know that women are more vulnerable, broadly speaking. What do we know about older women and financial abuse in particular?
Yes, I think it's important that we note that older women are incredibly resilient, and that we see, Melissa and I and the service sees a lot of older women who might be reporting and presenting with situations which basically amount to financial abuse. And as we know, that's also overlaid by a lot of psychological and emotional abuse. But in fact, they've found strategies for themselves to work with what they've got. They really, really want to keep and retain some of those family connections. So I suppose I just want to make note first that, yes, older women are not necessarily victims. They're sort of survivors often, I think, if we can look at it in that way. However, obviously, the women that we're seeing have also got some other factors that make them vulnerable to abuse, to financial abuse. Financial abuse tactics are about power and control, like other abuse factors. across all age groups, across all demographics. But older women, I think, are particularly vulnerable because of some factors such as they may not have had control over their own money for their whole lifetime, certainly perhaps for their married lifetime. Their husband might have been the person that was in charge of the money. They may not have ever had access to a credit card, for example, or their own pension. And then the partner might die. That role of financial decision maker might then transfer to an adult child. So this means that often the woman is not in an older woman may not be in a position of power in the household in regards to finances and in other aspects. And that puts them, I think, at increased risk.
And what are some of the barriers to them seeking help with that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that, Melissa and I are seeing increasingly older women presenting with, and reporting to us about financial abuse, and yet there are significant barriers for them to even, coming forward. And some of those might be, cultural barriers like language, but also they might be reliant on their family member for care, for example. So not wanting to actually, raise the issue or try and seek help because they might lose their caregiver, for example. I think it's important also to consider that the perpetrator is usually the older person, the older woman's child or grandchild. And I think that means that there are differences in terms of somebody's ability to take steps against that person because it is their child, and they are often filled with self-blame, actually, that it is somehow my fault because I have brought this child up and this child has done this to me. So, where did I go wrong, sort of thing.
So shame and guilt and stigma sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
Melissa, I think you might have an example of the sort of issues that we're talking about. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, elder abuse can take many forms. One example is a lady called Lynn, and she experienced financial elder abuse. She was of Chinese origin and English was her second language. And she was widowed. She had one son, and the son asked her or unduly influenced her to go to the bank. He put her under pressure to take out a loan against her house. When she was at the bank, she didn't understand what was happening, what the terms of the loan were at the time, and she wasn't encouraged to get independent legal advice. She entered into the loan and the money was given to the son. She understood that the son would pay it back, but he didn't do that. He spent the money on himself, and she was left in a difficult position. She was at risk of losing her home. So she came to our service and we were able to provide her with legal and social work support to deal with her issues.
So can you both talk a bit about this new multidisciplinary approach that you've been trialling?
Yeah, it's exciting actually, Diana, because Melissa and I are developing over time a sort of a wraparound service for clients like Lynn. I think we need to add that Lynn's story has similarities with a lot of people that we see. So our approach has been, it's pretty much guided by what that client might need or want at the time. So it's really about wrapping a service around the client's wants and needs at the time. So, for example, it might be about offering social work support and services alongside of that legal advice. In Lynn's case, as in many cases where there is considerable shame, as we've spoken about, and even coming to talk about the situation. So she was actually highly anxious and distressed on first meeting. So creating a safe place in which she could talk, an interpreter, for example, all of those sort of supports around it allowed her to explore in more detail what her issues were and how to address them.
That sounds like that would be much more effective. Melissa, do you want to comment add any comments to that approach?
Yes, on the legal side of that approach, what we do is we gather the facts from the client with the support of the social worker about the transaction. So what we do is we do that and then we look at possible legal remedies. So for example, in relation to the son, we look at the evidence that it was a loan and not a gift. So in terms of what was discussed and what evidence is there that the son has made an attempt to repay the loan. And we also look at remedies in relation to the bank. So for example, was the bank put on notice that at the time Lynn was at the bank, she was under duress by the son? And we also look at what attempts the bank made to make sure Lynn understood the terms of the loan. Did they follow best practice guidelines? So these are all the things that we look at from the legal side with the support of the social worker.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything to that, Kat?
And because of that, that as we explored the anxiety and stress that she was under, so on top of that or around that legal advice and support, there was some social work services in the form of casework and counselling, and also referral services that so that Lynn was able to get a bit of support while she was going through that legal process.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
So can you both discuss what can women do before they get into Lynn's situation? How can older women protect themselves, Melissa, from getting into this circumstance?
There are certain things women can do to put protective factors in place to protect themselves from financial elder abuse. Those sorts of things include planning ahead, so having an enduring power of attorney, appointing a person to make financial and legal decisions. So when the time comes and you're not able to make those decisions for yourself, you've got a trusted person that is able to do that for you. And also guardianship appointments in terms of your accommodation and medical dental functions, that someone could make those decisions if the time came and you couldn't for yourself. The other thing you can do is, if you're considering any agreements with family that are based on verbal discussions and based on trust, always get them reduced to writing and see your own independent solicitor to advise you on the terms of that written document and how you can protect your interests. So if in the future those agreements break down, you can rely on that agreement to protect your interests.
That sounds very thorough. And Kate?
Yeah, I think as Melissa said, early intervention is key. If you can put in place some of those protections and get some independent legal advice, definitely. But also we find that getting well linked into services and community can be, can leave someone less isolated, more able to know where they can go for help. If they're a bit more connected to their community, but also we know that getting home care in can, getting some professional supports like home care can also provide often, a professional avenue to get a bit of help or ask for some advice.
What about seniors' social groups and that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All those sorts of networks, I suppose, means that that older person is less isolated, and they might have someone that they can go and have a chat to about some of these issues before it gets to a point where we see a lot of people.
Yeah. And what resources are there? What information is there, Melissa, if people do want help for themselves or for family or friends?
So if people want help, they can contact the Seniors' Rights Service and get independent advice and assistance. There's also legal aid officers across New South Wales, some of which have specialist elder abuse units, including the Central Coast Elder Abuse Unit. There's community legal centres across New South Wales that can assist. And there's also the Ageing and Disability Commissioner, which runs the Ageing and Disability Helpline, and they also have an investigative function, so they can look into any elder abuse concerns.
Do you want to add anything, Kate, or is that?
I think we need to spruik again that we're a good place to start if people are needing to just have a chat confidentially about what's going on for them, and we can always guide them to other services as well. So yeah.
And we also do, if people are thinking of seeking help and they're computer literate, we have a lot of resources on our website, www.seniorsrightsservice.org.au. And right on the front page, you'll see something called Education Toolbox. And you'll find videos, webinars, and printed resources that might be of help to you. So thanks again for coming along today to discuss this important issue.
Thanks.